Today we're going to learn about wet-on-wet application for paint. We're going to learn about dry brushing application for paint. We're going to learn about scumbling brush technique. And we are also going to learn about simple crossing blending, kind of an impasto, kind of a painterly technique. Then finally we're going to work on our line work. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so basically the first technique, wet on wet, means pretty much what it sounds like. You're going to work very quickly in order to paint, put both layers down before it completely dries. And I'm just using a nice crisscrossing motion. I'm going this way and then this way, just to vary it a little bit so it doesn't all go in the same direction. And then I'm going to put a second layer on while the first layer is still wet. Thus, the first layer is wet, the second layer is wet, wet on wet. And it's going to have, I'm going to have 3 different colors. It's going to blend nicely while still looking somewhat different. So impasto kind of has this brusherly technique where you can see the brush strokes. But if you'd like to blend, what I recommend is that you put 2 shades next to each other and then you very gently and lightly bring them together. And if you find that you're just adding more color on top, try to scrape your brush off on your palette and then go back, and with less less paint on your brush, you'll tend to blend what's on the canvas instead of adding to what is already on there. All right, so I'm just going to make a few more brusherly techniques on top. And there's some texture for you, some nice impasto texture. Next, I'm going to tell you a little bit about dry brush. So for dry brush, I'm gonna have to scrape my brush off on my palette just a little bit. And then when I just have enough on my brush that I can see the bristles, but there's absolutely no globs, it's even a little sticky, then you have enough. And the trick to dry brushing is if you're perpendicular to the paper, you're going to make a nice thick line. As soon as you go down and you bring the handle closer at a steeper and steeper angle, you're going to end up having less and less effect on the canvas. Also, pressure does affect it. So you can play around with that, make a few lines, maybe a 45-degree angle with a relatively firm pressure would be good. And of course it will run out as you paint because there's a finite amount of paint on your brush. The next technique that I'd like to go over is different things to do with these applications. So wet and wet, I'll get some nice wet paint down. Scumbling. Let's try some scumbling. So I'm going to pick up some blue paint to add on top of this yellowish brown. And scumbling is just gently going in random directions to make a texture, even like that. And then dry brushing, get rid of some of this paint. Scumbling looks somewhat similar. Being gentle to the brush, but allowing some parts to show through because after all it is dry brushing. Like so. All right, then there's the crossing that I went over, that I said before. You just basically crisscross, flipping your brush if you'd like to even, or you can do this. It's up to you. And line work. For line work, you have the option of using a flat brush is the first thing I'm going to demonstrate. You can either do it like this, like I just did, or you can turn your bristles in the same direction as your line, which will make it thin, as well as nice and dense, which is nice. And also, it'll vary as you go up, down, and as you move around. Okay? And then we have a round brush option. I'll pick up some green. And the round brush option is nice because you can vary the line based upon the pressure. So if I start out nice and light, I'm just going to go like this, show you a little bit, and then I'm going to start adding more pressure. As I add more pressure, it's going to spread the bristles, which makes the line thicker. Now I'm just running out of paint. And as I go lighter again, the line thins out. And there you go. We have wet on wet, dry brush, scumbling, cross work, and line work. So we have a bunch of different techniques for you there.